Melissa,
Sarah,
what are we doing today?
we're chatting with one of our favorite listeners, Shanda Slipp.
Shanda, what are we reading today?
The Life Impossible by Matt Haig.
Shanda, we are truly delighted to have you as a guest. You have been one of our top supporters right since day one. So thank you so much for always being there to say good things about this little podcast of ours.
Thank you so much for having me. I joked, I think I have sort of fangirled my way to this appearance because, as you said, I have been a huge fan right from the beginning. And, I just listen to every episode and share. And I've, gotten some great book recommendations from you both. So, yeah, I'm really happy to be asked and be on the show.
Awesome.
Well, and Shanda, this is the first time that you and I are actually meeting, quote unquote, in person. Although I hear so much about you that I feel like I kind of already know you.
Same about you.
But one thing that Melissa recently told me is that you are a lover of one of my favorite places in the city of St. John's, the Bagel Cafe on Duckworth Street.
I may have been there a year 3 days ago.
I am envious. What is it that you love about that place? And what do you normally order when you go there?
I did part of my schooling in St. John's. So I lived there for about 6 years, and we went to the Bagel Cafe a lot, sort of for a weekend brunch. And it was before there was an upstairs as well. It's just this kind of quirky little place with a huge breakfast menu. The food is really good, really consistent. I always get the same thing, which kind of kills me because it's a massive menu, as you know. There's so many options, but I can't deviate. I get this bagel sandwich that's got like an everything bagel, and it's sort of a fried chicken kind of patty with cream cheese, onions. It is so good. I can't even. Yeah,
That's great.
And the hash browns, the best, and the giant coffees.
Yeah, I know. I love that they have so many like little nooks and crannies. So you feel like you can really go there and have like an intimate conversation because like you're kind of like squirreled away in a corner, but like in every booth and every table it looks slightly different and mismatched cups and plates. And yeah, I too, when we were doing our MA program, not so much Melissa, did you ever go to the Bagel Cafe?
I definitely did go there from time to time, but not as frequently as you. Like, Shanda, when you sent me that picture, I was like, well, they're just going to hit it off like gangbusters. Like, I'm pretty sure there's like a photo on like a wall of fame somewhere with Sarah's image on it because she just was like always there, always going there. So I definitely don't have like a regular item off the menu or something that I would get.
Yeah, I would always get, it used to be called, I think, like the vegetable Benedict, bagel Benedict, but now it's like the grilled tomato Benedict, but I would get it every single time I went. And I would go there, I would say at least once a week, like usually a Saturday or a Sunday, every single week for probably like, the better part of a year.
The three of us never overlapped though. Like there was no time when all three of us lived in St. John's. When did you leave, Shanda?
I was there 2003 until 2009.
Oh, we totally overlapped. You and me especially, because I got there in 2003 and was there to 2000.
You might have been at the Bagel Cafe.
I bet we were.
How cool is that?
No, that is very possible. We wouldn't have known, right? So Shanda, I feel like your reading pace is off the charts. I feel like you read so much, like anything I ever pitch to you or mention, you're like, yes, I read that. Yes, I read that. Or you'll be like, no, I will. And then you have it done like immediately. So I want to like pick your brain. What are your tips and your tricks? You're a busy person. Like you have a medical practice. You have 2 very active children. You're involved in volunteering in the community. How do you prioritize time for reading?
Oh my, well, I feel like I I got back into it around COVID and just became one of my sort of hobbies that, I was in a routine of doing, and just at least reading before bed every night, whether it was just like a half hour. And then, at the cabin, as you know, we have a beautiful cabin on Bombay Pond. We got that cabin in 2019, and we didn't have internet or cell service there until maybe 2 years ago. So we had a few years where really your only option was reading, board games, being outside, all those things, right?
And all wonderful things.
Yes, definitely. But, eventually we acquiesced and got Starlink. So yeah. So anyway, I just got really back into reading, and I really like, the Goodreads kind of challenge where you set a target number. Like, me, I'm very competitive. So I'll compete with myself to get to my target. I mean, I'm definitely a fast reader, like whether it's just born out of being in school for a long time and all the studying, that we had to do or what, but I definitely can zip through books pretty quickly. So I have a bad habit of, I start a book, I don't really quit it, even if it's terrible. Like, I don't know, I just sort of push through, so that it probably puts up my tally. I'm probably skimming a few really bad books.
There's no such thing as like a DNF, though.
It's pretty rare. It has to be pretty, I don't know. Yeah. I just finished one today that I was like, what am I doing? This is but
and now you're going to have the two of us like grilling you on a book. So it'll be like, did you skim this? Because we have some pretty intense questions to follow up on. Well, maybe we can like just kind of get into it here. Do you want to give us a summary of The Life Impossible by Matt Haig?
Sure. Yeah. So I have the book here. It has this kind of intriguing cover of like a simple picture, a bright blue color. And there's a boat and a person in a boat kind of looking out in the distance with a rock behind the boat. The book is interestingly about a 72-year-old woman. So Matt Haig, a male author, like his central character is this older woman who's a retired math teacher. As the book starts off, she gets a letter from a former student who's struggling with some kind of like depression and grief and guilt, and kind of asking for advice because she had a big impact on him as a teacher. And she writes him back and says, a little bit of advice, but says, instead of giving you advice, I'm going to tell you a story. And the story you might not believe, but you should believe because it's all true. And it has magic in it. And you will have to suspend sort of your perceptions of reality to believe this story. So it starts off almost as kind of like a mystery, because this story is unfolding, and how the story starts as she tells it is that she has mysteriously inherited a house in Ibiza, Spain, and the information comes to her by way of a letter from a lawyer who tells her that she years and years ago basically performed an act of kindness for this acquaintance. It was never forgotten. And this old acquaintance, not even a friend really, but has died and left her this house. And she has died under mysterious circumstances. So as it starts out, it becomes kind of almost a murder mystery, because she then goes to Ibiza and she starts by trying to investigate how this acquaintance died and why she was the one chosen to inherit this house. So that's kind of how it starts off.
This is interesting, and definitely like the nod to like magic realism and stuff is very prominent then. So whether that theme went throughout with this sort of like suspension of disbelief.
Yes. So the magic realism comes in maybe about halfway through. So I really enjoyed that first part of it, when she kind of goes there and she's experiencing the island and she's kind of starting to delve into what happened to this acquaintance, Christina, trying to figure things out. And she meets a few characters, like this kind of eclectic, very beautifully described dive instructor named Alberto, who, she describes just so well as this sort of grisly pirate type, almost. Like she comes to his shack on the beach and he's there in just no shirt and his shorts and his big gut kind of hanging out, and this like pirate hair, and he's got a goat named Nostradamus he's wandering about. So it's a very, like, you get the visual of it all. But then what happens is it kind of goes a little bit sort of sci-fi, kind of this magic realism where, you know, it's a real world setting, but there's some magical elements at play. So this former dive instructor, he was a marine biologist, and he believes in this sort of bigger presence, as he calls it la presencia. And out in the water is this sort of glowing algae. This, he believes, has magical powers, and that this is sort of connected to Christina's death and will become a big part of Grace Winters, the main character, of her sort of transformation.
Very interesting. When you started this book, did you have any expectations? Had you read any of Matt Haig's books previously? Did you read The Midnight Library? Or I think he had another book of course now.
Something about an airplane, isn't it?
Yeah, so I read The Midnight Library and How to Stop Time. And I really enjoyed those books because they're very different and unique. He's been called therapeutic fantasy. Fantasy. So there's always themes of often depression, mental illness, grief. The Midnight Library, like the main character at the beginning of the book, has a suicide attempt, basically an overdose attempt, and then kind of goes through this journey. And it was really interesting. And this book, in a similar way, the main character she's widowed. She's had a son who died tragically when he was young. She's carrying a lot of guilt from that, still grieving, and essentially depressed when the book starts. So I kind of knew that coming in, you know, having read Matt Haig before, that would sort of be likely a central theme.
Well, and even like the student that reaches out to her is kind of at a moment of crisis or self-examination and wondering what they should do. And so even that seems like it plays into those like themes of mental health and being at a crossroads in one's life.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a big theme of the book because, you know, she's 72 and kind of going through those types of things herself, and then goes to Ibiza for this sort of adventure and, you know, on this path of self-discovery and, you know, how it transforms her, and this magical presence is going to literally transform her. But it becomes very metaphorical of how she kind of awakens from this depression and anhedonia and, you know, starts to see life differently and sort of comes back to life.
And I had to look that word up too. Like the opposite of feeling nothing is feeling everything, and that's anhedonia. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's interesting because it's a term like we use in the medical world a lot. I don't usually use the term, but I describe it. So it's a prominent feature of depression where you feel numb. You maybe don't feel anything, but you definitely don't feel pleasure the way that you maybe normally would have. Things that normally you would enjoy doing, they don't kind of bring you the same joy. And he actually describes it, and I might have even dog-eared that page just a second, because he does describe that very well, I thought. At the beginning of the book, he said, this is Grace talking. The truth is that I haven't really felt much for years, just a vague, lingering sadness, anhedonia. Do you know that word? The inability to feel pleasure, an unfeeling. Well, it had been with me for some time. I've known depression, and it wasn't that. I didn't have the intensity of depression. It was just a lack. I was just existing. Food was just there to fill me up. Music had become nothing more than patterned noise. I was simply, you know, there.
As a physician, like you're faced, I'm sure, very frequently with people who are facing like this type of thing. Is there ever a moment where you're like, I want you to read this book? Have you ever prescribed a book? This is what I meant.
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't think so. I think, I do find sometimes books really do describe it. I mean, The Midnight Library, I've heard, you know, that came out kind of right early
2020.
Yeah, right in COVID. And it kind of did transform. It went viral. It was one of the book of the year type thing. And people really did, like, it resonated with them, people who struggled with mental illness. So no, I can't say that I have. Like, there's a couple kind of more sort of medical type books that we do just recommend sometimes to people, like that have more of like a workbook type thing, or they describe things and, help people like journal or process their emotions and stuff. I do find that, and I mean, there's lots of authors that, I just read a book that you recommended, Melissa, to me.
Really good, actually.
Thank you. Just finished it last week, but really good, actually, that I thought described, depression and mental illness and sort of a breakdown, brilliantly, in a very kind of contemporary way. So I do find that, often, and I'm sure that could help people, when they see their experience mirrored. And I think that's what Matt Haig, because he's very vocal about his own struggles in the past with mental illness, and he's actually written some books that are not even fiction. They're more kind of self-help category, I think. So it does seem to be a theme that he goes for.
I know I did a little bit of research, and I had read The Midnight Library. I actually read it earlier this year on a plane because I'd seen it so much, and I was at an airport and I was like, oh, I'll grab this book. And I read it, I think, just during the flight,
which is clearly why I was like, that one's about a plane. It's not about a plane. It's about you
on a plane.
I did a post of the book and there's a plane in the background.
So I'm a visual learner, Sarah. You can't throw this stuff at me. It's discordant.
But Reasons to Stay Alive is another one of his books that he wrote in, I believe it was 2015. And I just listened to like a great podcast interview with him, just talking about his experience with depression and addiction and getting to a low point and feeling suicidal, and then being able to kind of get himself into recovery from that. But what I found really interesting, knowing where this book ended up being set, is that he had spent his younger years in Ibiza and had some of his like lowest points there. So really interesting that he decided when he wrote this book to set this as like a place of self-discovery and transformation, in light of the fact that this was a place that had like a lot of bad memories for him. So I found that interesting. And
yes, yeah, I can only imagine it was sort of a healing journey for him as well. I don't know, but I think that is part of it, and that's why he chose to set it there.
I wonder too, Ibiza being an island, and I wonder if islandness comes through. Like, does it capture any sense of small island close-knit culture, or does it even play with isolation? And when you were talking about the magic realism coming from the water, like water is magical and mysterious and healing in its own way. So do you have any ideas or thoughts about maybe just even the setting itself contributing to the overall message of the story?
Yeah, I think in kind of two ways. Like, one, I think people hear about Ibiza, it's kind of this like party island, the tourists go and there's nightclub scene and all that. And this is sort of a totally different side of it. Like, she's going there, stay in this house, and she's meeting locals and getting the culture and, going to the market and the beach and that sort of thing. So you kind of get a sense of that community feel. And then another big theme of the book, which didn't engage me as much, the way it transpires and ends up, it becomes kind of an environmental war, for lack of a better term. Like, there's this sort of movement in Ibiza, and it's a real group where they're trying to preserve the natural environment. And this rock that's on the cover is like thought to be sort of a mystical rock. And there's a land developer, a very kind of caricature, kind of evil, like rich guy coming from somewhere else who wants to build a mega hotel on the island and sort of ruin the natural beauty of the island. And they sort of, as the book goes on, fight this evil land developer, to save the island. And so that storyline like didn't really resonate with me, and it becomes a little silly and kind of drags on for a lot of the second half of the book. But it does, those themes I think were very important to him, of talking about Ibiza as this beautiful natural place that has been transformed a fair bit, I think, by that nightlife kind of party culture, where at the same time still trying to maintain some of that natural beauty and, untouched land.
a lot of people say that a lot of their mental illness and anxiety is connected to like where we are with the environment and, sustainability. Were the two themes connected, or did you almost feel like he bit off more than he can chew by trying to tackle like two major behemoth themes like that?
Yeah. So where it kind of fell apart for me was it becomes very preachy. Basically she gets transformed quite literally by this sort of glowing presence in the water. And she gets some magical powers, basically like telekinesis, and she can learn anything, by looking at a book. And that was actually fine, because it was very interesting the way he describes things. Like, let me just read you this one part that was really kind of neat. After she gets this kind of sort of magical ability, and it doesn't happen all at once, they kind of describe it over some time, but so she's discovering orange juice. I mean, it's really kind of metaphorical for, I think, coming out of a depression, and kind of coming back out of that anhedonia we talked about and coming back to life. So she says, I took a few gulps and closed my eyes, as committed as a wolf howling to the moon. I've drunk orange juice for most of my 72 years, even freshly squeezed orange juice on many occasions, but I can honestly say that I have never really noticed it. Orange juice was the water of fruit juices, I used to feel. It kind of just existed. Part of that same category of food that includes vanilla ice cream and tea and toast that was perfectly lovely in a neutral, take it for granted kind of way. But this was different. This was the most wonderful drink I've ever tasted. The competing but perfectly balanced sweetness and bitterness was as complex as the fineness of Zinfandel. I just savored every mouthful. I ended up finishing the whole bottle. And it kind of goes on like that's a whole chapter kind of describing the pleasure of discovering and drinking this orange juice and how it was so amazing. So that part was really interesting and good. But then what happens is, as she kind of comes back to life, this transformation, she's able to kind of use this to sort of fight for the island of Ibiza and the environment against this evil like hotel developer. So
I just picture like somebody like twirling a mustache like every time you talk about this developer.
That's how I picture him almost. There's like this big confrontation in a casino, and
oh my goodness,
it gets really kind of silly. So I mean, I think, did he bite off more than he can chew? Yeah, it kind of, and that part drags on. So it does feel like a lot, and it does get very preachy. Like it says, about probably like everything is connected, maybe 20 times. Like it keeps throwing these messages at you. Alberto, this quirky like dive instructor who believes in this presence, he's the one kind of making these sweeping like, life is beautiful kind of, we're all connected, we're all, together, the earth, the music,
but he's the guy who had like the pot belly at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not really taking him seriously anyway.
Yeah. So it is that kind of contrast, because is he this genius who's like, or is he crazy?
Yeah.
Right. And so, there's some parts that like, the more I think about it, the more I think, oh yeah, that was quite clever. But at the time reading it felt very preachy is the best word that I can describe for it. And maybe a little bit too contrived.
Yeah. One of the reviews, and I did end up sending it to Melissa, it was from the Washington Post. And I have to say, when I was listening to that podcast, like he sounds like such a pleasant guy, like, and I really enjoyed listening to him. And I was like, oh, because I will say, when I read The Midnight Library, I get that there's some positivity to be taken from it. I didn't really enjoy the book. Like, I feel like I'm like one of the only people out there that was like, It just, I felt like it was so obvious where it was going.
Yes.
And maybe it's supposed to be. Maybe you're supposed to know that right at the beginning where it's going, but I did. And I was like, okay, well.
Yes, same. And this has a very similar feeling.
Yeah. And I don't know, like maybe that's just like a little nitpick of mine. Like I want to be a little bit surprised by where a book, I don't want to be like, oh, okay, it's that story. But I do just want to read this quote because it cracked me up. Again, from the Washington Post. Admittedly, charming moments and light touches of wit run throughout The Life Impossible, but they're overwhelmed by the story's commitment to refrigerator magnet inspiration. The whole thing starts to taste like a tepid dish of coq au vin made from the plucked carcass of Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Oh, yikes.
I was like, oh my God, tell us how you really feel.
But that is pretty spot on. That's what I was trying to say, but not as eloquent.
I am going to start using refrigerator magnet inspiration as a term. The whole live, laugh, love, like that is it. But
yeah,
that
there was a lot. Yeah, a lot of that. The way he writes is very, that observational kind of, you can picture the scenes, like he has a nice way of describing things and that sort of thing. But yes, there's a lot of refrigerator magnets.
Well, we may have preempted the answer to our next question a little bit. In your opinion, is The Life Impossible by Matt Haig a could read, a should read, or a must read?
Sadly for me, The Life Impossible is a could read. And I was really hoping when I came on your wonderful podcast to be able to bring a must read, or at least a should read. But alas, this is what I've chosen. So, I think this is a heavily hyped book. Like people have been waiting for this since the Midnight Library. I think I had the release date in my calendar and, I got it a week after it came out. So I think, people are still going to seek it out and read it. And, obviously might have different opinions from me, but the first half I really liked, and then it kind of went downhill for me, and it does go on for a long time. It does get a bit boring and preachy, and not my fave.
Well, that's okay. I don't know. I mean, maybe there is an audience out there where this could read as a should or a must read for them, or this is what they're looking for, and like this sense of comfort maybe that they might get from reading this. And
yeah, I mean, and it's also a very quick read. Like he does these really short chapters, that you can digest really quickly. I mean, I think the story of sort of the transformation and like it's never too late and the overcoming grief and all that, are super powerful and important messages. But I've read books that probably dealt with that a bit better. And the magical part of things. And I do read the odd fairy fantasy book, but
especially the spicy ones.
Yeah, right. So, but I think I've discovered that the magic realism category is maybe not for me.
Unless there's an explicit warning on the cover.
That's right. I need the fully magical fairy smut as my...
I do think that magic realism is like, it's kind of like when you and I were talking about the whole idea of accents and how they're depicted in a book. Like it can either put you really into it and like really grab your attention and make you engaged, or it can just put you right out of it. I think it can really go either way. And how it's done, I feel like it's a delicate dance to make a magic realistic plot line or element feel like that suspension of disbelief, right? That you're willing to go there.
Because I think the Midnight Library and the How to Stop Time like do that as well, but I think a bit more successfully for me. I think some of the other storylines in here about the kind of land developer and the environmental thing, and there's some other little like subplots that didn't really do it for me.
Well, nonetheless, we're so glad to have you here, to have this conversation with you and to hear your thoughts on The Life Impossible by Matt Haig. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. If I'm ever back, I promise I will bring a better choice.
No, this is good. We need a good range. And like Sarah said, this is somebody's must read, right? This could be like a good one to get someone out of a reading slump or someone who's interested in getting more into reading or something. It could be a good starting point for them. So thank you so much.
And nice to finally meet you in person through a screen.
Next time we'll meet at the Bagel Cafe.
Oh my God.
Bye.
I will take you up on it. The three of us. It'll be
amazing.
It'll be lovely.
Wonderful.